What if I told you that some of the most surreal, otherworldly places on Earth are not in Iceland, not in Patagonia, not buried in some remote corner of Southeast Asia? They're right here, in America, hidden in plain sight, scattered across 14 states, sitting in valleys and along coastlines and on the edges of deserts that most people drive past without ever stopping. This is the America that takes your breath away before you even realize what you're looking at. The America that makes you pull over, step out of the car, and stand there in the wind with your mouth open. We start in Central Oregon, in a region most Americans have never heard of. In the shadow of the Ochoco Mountains, where the landscape quietly prepares to astonish you. And right away, within minutes of arriving, the Earth stops making sense. These are the Painted Hills, part of the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument. And what you're seeing isn't paint. It isn't a filter. It isn't a trick of the light. It's time. Compressed and exposed and arranged by forces that were working long before the first human being ever walked on this continent. Each stripe of color running across these hills is a different chapter of Earth's history. The deep red layers are rich in iron oxide, the same compound that makes Mars red. The jet black bands are manganese, deposited in ancient swamps. The warm gold and ochre layers are the remains of plant matter, leaves and roots and organic material from forests that existed 33 million years ago, slowly transformed into mineral pigment by time and chemistry. The pale gray, volcanic ash from eruptions that happened before the Cascade Range even existed. You can walk to the edge of the designated paths and stand within arm's reach of geology that spans 35 million years. There are no trees here, no sound except wind, just color and silence and the strange, humbling feeling that you are standing inside a painting that took the Earth itself 35 million years to finish. But if the Earth can do this to rolling hills in Oregon, imagine what it has done to an entire valley in Montana. From Central Oregon, we travel northeast into the Rocky Mountain West. And within hours, everything expands. The sky doubles. The mountains triple in height. And the valley that opens up in front of you is so vast, so perfectly proportioned between water and mountain and sky, that it genuinely looks designed, like a film director's ideal of what the American West should look like. This is Flathead Valley, Montana. Stretching more than 50 miles from north to south, flanked on the east by the Swan Range and on the west by the Cabinet Mountains, with Glacier National Park anchoring its northern edge and Flathead Lake, the largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, sitting at its heart like a mirror the size of a small country. Lake is extraordinary on its own terms. The water is so clear you can see the lake bottom from the surface in some sections. It sits at 2,900 feet of elevation, surrounded by mountains that push above 9,000 feet. In spring, cherry orchards bloom along the eastern shore. In summer, the lake turns a shade of deep blue that photographers spend entire careers trying to capture accurately. In autumn, the larch trees turn gold on the surrounding slopes and reflect in the water below, a double image of the same fire. And in winter, the valley floor turns silver and the peaks disappear entirely into cloud. Big sky, bigger water. The kind of place that makes you feel both very small and very alive at the same time, which is perhaps the rarest feeling a landscape can produce. But what if we took all that vastness, stripped away the mountains and the trees and the wildlife, and replaced every square mile of it with nothing but white? There is a place in the Tularosa Basin of southern New Mexico where the ground turns white. Not white like snow, not white like bleached rock or white sand beaches. White like something that has no reference point in ordinary experience. White Sands National Park is the largest gypsum dune field on Earth. 275 square miles of brilliant white sand formed from gypsum crystals that eroded from the surrounding San Andres and Sacramento Mountains, dissolved in rainwater, carried into an ancient lake bed, and then crystallized as the water evaporated. The process has been repeating for thousands of years. And because gypsum reflects heat rather than absorbing it, the sand stays cool to the touch even under the blazing desert sun, one of this landscape's strangest physical properties. The dunes are always moving. They migrate with the prevailing winds at a rate of up to 30 feet per year, swallowing yucca plants whole, burying them alive, then abandoning them as the dune moves on, leaving the plants standing alone in the flat sand, their roots still attached to the buried remnant of an old dune 10 feet below the surface. Walk out far enough into the dune field, and you lose all sense of direction, all sense of scale. There are no landmarks, no shadows for most of the day. The horizon is white in every direction. At sunset, the transformation is total. The white turns pale pink, then deep gold, then lavender, then a deep bruised purple as the sun drops behind the mountains and the last light drains away. It is one of the great natural spectacles on the continent, and hardly anyone sees it. "100 miles northeast of Las Vegas, in the Mojave Desert, the landscape suddenly ignites. The rock turns red. Vivid, almost violent red. The kind of red that makes you question whether what you're seeing is real or whether the desert heat has finally gotten to you." Valley of Fire State Park is Nevada's oldest state park and its most dramatic. The red Aztec sandstone that dominates this landscape is 150 million years old. Laid down as ancient sand dunes during the age of dinosaurs, compressed over geological time, uplifted by tectonic forces, and then sculpted by millions of years of wind and water erosion into these savage, gravity-defying formations. Beehives, Elephant Rock, the cabins, the fire wave, a swirling, layered formation of red and white sandstone that looks like it was carved by an artist rather than by rain. In the late afternoon, when the sun drops to the correct angle, the entire valley appears to pulse with its own internal light. The iron oxide in the sandstone absorbs heat all day and releases it slowly. The rocks genuinely glow. It is one of the only places in the American West where the landscape seems to be performing for you, actively showing off its own improbable beauty. The ancestral Puebloans recognized this too. They carved petroglyphs into the canyon walls here more than 2,000 years ago. Geometric spirals, bighorn sheep, human figures, symbols whose exact meanings we still debate. In the evening light, with the red walls blazing around you and the ancient carvings at eye level, you understand something about why human beings have always needed to leave their mark on extraordinary places. This is a place that demands to be documented, demands to be remembered. In the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, deep in a boreal forest of white cedar and black spruce and hemlock, a river the color of dark honey goes over the edge. The sound reaches you before the falls do, a low, thunderous roar that builds for 10 minutes as you walk the trail through the trees, preparing you for something large. And then the trees part and the falls appear, and large doesn't begin to cover it. Tahquamenon Falls is one of the largest waterfalls east of the Mississippi. The upper falls drop nearly 50 feet over a crest that stretches 200 feet wide, one of the widest waterfalls in the eastern United States. But it's the color that stops people cold. The water is amber, nearly brown, the color of strong tea or dark honey or aged whiskey held up to the light. Not polluted, perfectly clean, legally drinkable, but stained by the tannins from the ancient cedar forest draining into the river above the falls. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote about this river in the Song of Hiawatha, by the rushing Tahquamenon, and standing here you understand why a 19th century poet couldn't let it go. There is something about Tahquamenon that resists forgetting. The sound alone is enough to empty your mind completely. The amber water hitting the pool below throws up a mist that drifts back over you, cool and faintly scented with cedar. In October, when the surrounding forest blazes with the full intensity of the Upper Peninsula Fall, Tahquamenon Falls becomes perhaps the single most color-saturated landscape in all of American nature, from the crash of water to the silence of stone, because in southern Utah, an entire staircase has been carved into the earth itself. If you want to understand deep time, not centuries, not millennia, but hundreds of millions of years laid out before you in physical, touchable, walk-throughable form, come to southern Utah, specifically to the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument, one of the last truly wild places in the American West, and one of the least visited landscapes of its size anywhere in the country. Nearly 2 million acres of canyon, mesa, butte, and wilderness. To put that in perspective, that is larger than the states of Delaware and Rhode Island combined. Large sections remain genuinely unmapped. Fossil beds here continue to yield new dinosaur species. The Escalante River, which carved the monument's most dramatic canyons over millions of years, flows through a labyrinth of slot canyons barely wide enough for a person to walk sideways through. Canyons where the walls glow orange and gold when light filters down from the slot above, and where ancient Fremont Indian pictographs are preserved on the walls in perfect condition because so few people have ever found them. The Grand Staircase itself refers to the sequence of massive rock terraces visible as you move south through the monument. Each terrace a different geological era, descending in great steps from the pink cliffs of Bryce Canyon in the north down to the Grand Canyon in the south. Hundreds of millions of years of Earth history arranged in a single southward-facing view, readable like the spine of a library if you know the language of rock. This is a place where getting lost is almost the point, where the landscape actively resists summary. From the deep ancient canyons, we rise into the Colorado Rockies, where winter is not a season, it's a way of life. Most people know Breckenridge as a ski resort town, but most people only see it in winter from the base of a mountain, with their attention fixed on the slopes above. What they miss, what the weekend visitor almost always misses, is this: the extraordinary privilege of living at nearly 2 miles above sea level, where the atmosphere is thinner, the sky is deeper blue, the stars are brighter, and the relationship between a human being and the scale of the natural world around them is fundamentally renegotiated. Breckenridge sits at 9,600 feet in Summit County, Colorado, one of the highest incorporated towns in the United States. The surrounding peaks rise above 13,000 feet. The ski runs that descend from those peaks are among the longest and highest in North America. But in July, when the ski runs are hidden under an explosion of alpine wildflowers, Indian paintbrush, columbine, blue lupin, golden aster, Breckenridge reveals a completely different identity. In October, when the aspen groves turn the mountainsides into curtains of gold, it reveals another. Gold was discovered here in 1859, and the Victorian mining boom that followed left behind an entire 19th century Main Street that still stands today. Preserved brick and clapboard buildings housing coffee shops and gear stores, looking up at mountains that were ancient long before any human being had ever set eyes on them. There is something about altitude that changes how beauty feels. We return to Utah now, because Utah has saved its strangest secret for last. Over 2,000 stone arches. 2,000. Standing in a single national park in southeastern Utah. Not cave formations, not human-built structures. Freestanding stone arches, open to the sky, formed entirely by natural geological processes over millions of years. Arches National Park contains the highest density of natural stone arches anywhere on Earth. The smallest are barely large enough to crawl through. The largest, Landscape Arch, spans 306 feet from base to base, making it the longest natural arch on the planet. It is so thin at its narrowest point, less than 6 feet, that geologists have been predicting its imminent collapse for decades. In 1991, a slab of rock 11 meters long fell from its underside. The arch still stands. The arch is formed from Entrada sandstone, desert dunes compressed into rock 150 million years ago, buried under subsequent layers, then uplifted and exposed by erosion. Water seeped into the vertical joints in the rock, dissolved the weaker material, created fins, then windows, then arches. The process is still happening. Every heavy rainstorm removes more material. Every freeze-thaw cycle widens existing cracks. The park changes constantly, just on a timescale too slow for us to watch in a single lifetime. Every year they change. Walls collapse. New windows open. The landscape is alive, just not on our schedule. We've been in the desert long enough. It's time to go north. Far north. Into Alaska. 13 miles from downtown Juneau, Alaska, a river of ice 12 miles long and over 1.5 miles wide has been flowing continuously since the last ice age. Mendenhall Glacier moves at a rate of about 2 feet per day, slowly enough that you cannot perceive the motion, fast enough that over the course of a year it advances and retreats in ways that are clearly visible in time-lapse photography. The glacier produces a color that the human eye almost doesn't know how to process. Blue, but not sky blue or ocean blue. A deep, compressed, luminescent blue that looks more like a digital creation than a natural phenomenon. It comes from compression. Ice that has been packed and repacked for 1,500 years or more loses all its trapped air bubbles, becomes dense enough to absorb every wavelength of visible light except blue, and reflects that blue back at you with a purity and intensity that makes you stop and stare and doubt what you're seeing. At the glacier's edge, waterfalls pour directly from the surrounding Boundary Range peaks into the glacial lake below. Nugget Falls drops 377 feet from a hanging valley directly beside the glacier face. In the lake, icebergs calved from the glacier float in slowly shifting clusters. You can kayak between them. I don't know how else to say this. It looks like someone left an army of goblins outside and forgot to bring them in. Thousands of them. Stubby, round-headed, mushroom-shaped figures standing in a flat red sand valley in central Utah, close enough together that navigating between them feels like threading through a crowd. Goblin Valley State Park contains one of the most bizarre concentrations of hoodoo formations in the world. They are made of Entrada sandstone, the same rock that built arches, but here the erosion pattern has been different. Instead of creating arches and fins and spires, the differential erosion of harder cap rock over softer underlying sandstone has produced thousands of rounded, bulbous formations, each one unique, each one slightly different in height and shape and posture, each one looking uncannily like a living thing frozen mid-stride. Unlike most protected natural sites, Goblin Valley has no designated trails within the valley floor. You are free to walk wherever you choose, to weave between the goblins, to climb them, to find your own path through the thousands of formations. At midday, in the high desert heat, the place has an eerie playfulness. At sunset, the formations turn dark against an orange sky and the playfulness evaporates entirely. They stop being funny and start being something older and stranger. Something that has been standing here, patient and inscrutable, for 170 million years. Lake Superior is not a lake, not in any meaningful sense of that word. It is an inland ocean, the largest freshwater lake on Earth by surface area, covering 31,700 square miles. So wide that weather systems form over it, so cold that its deep waters preserve shipwrecks in near-perfect condition for centuries. So powerful that it generates waves that have sunk our freighters and changed the course of Great Lakes shipping history. It does not feel like a lake when you stand at its shore. It feels like something that could swallow you without noticing. The Apostle Islands National Lakeshore sits in the western tip of Lake Superior, off the Bayfield Peninsula of northern Wisconsin, a cluster of 21 islands ranging in size from tiny rocky outcroppings to Madeline Island, which is large enough to have its own town, its own history, its own annual ice road across the frozen lake in winter. The island's shorelines are dominated by ancient red sandstone sea caves, carved by thousands of years of wave action into tunnels and chambers and arching ceilings draped with stalactites. In summer, you see kayak into these caves. In the coldest winters, when the lake freezes solid enough to walk on, which happens only once every few years, you walk across the ice to reach those same caves transformed into something from another world. The wave spray that coated the cave walls all summer has frozen into curtains of ice, chandeliers of icicles, cathedral formations of blue and white that glow in the winter light. It is one of the rarest natural spectacles in the American Midwest, and most Americans have never heard of it. "40 miles east of Colorado Springs, the land is flat and unremarkable. Shortgrass prairie stretching in every direction with nothing to interrupt it. There is no obvious reason to stop here. No signage visible from the highway. No mountain backdrop. No obvious geological drama. And then you park and walk a quarter mile across the prairie and the ground simply opens up and the earth reveals something it has been hiding for 55 million years. Paint Mine's Interpretive Park is one of Colorado's least known geological secrets. In a shallow basin carved by erosion into the prairie floor, you find a miniature badland of colorful clay spires. White, cream, pink, rust, burnt orange, and purple, rising from the sandy floor in formations that look hand-sculpted. They are made of ancient volcanic ash and clay minerals deposited 55 million years ago, when this part of Colorado sat at the edge of a vast inland sea. The colors come from varying concentrations of iron and other minerals in the clay layers. The same chemistry as the painted hills, but at a scale you can stand next to, reach out and touch, examine up close. The Paleo-Indians who lived here 9,000 years ago understood the value of this clay. They quarried it for pigment, grinding the colored material into powder for use in ceremonies and rock art. For 9 millennia, human beings have stood in this hollow in the prairie and seen these colors as something extraordinary. On that, at least, we are still in agreement. And speaking of the past, our next stop is a ghost town. But not just any ghost town. In 1877, a major gold deposit was discovered at Bodie, in the high desert at the eastern foot of the Sierra Nevada. Within 2 years, Bodie was the second largest city in California. 30,000 people. 10,000 buildings, a Wells Fargo office, a miners' union hall, 3 breweries, and 65 saloons operating around the clock. It was one of the wildest, most violent mining towns in the American West, a place where the phrase "bad man from Bodie" became a genuine expression of danger, where the local newspaper reported murders with the same matter-of-fact tone it used for weather and commodity prices. The gold ran out. The people left. First dozens, then hundreds, then the whole town, departure by departure, over the first half of the 20th century. And Bodie was simply abandoned. Not burned, not demolished, not deliberately preserved. Just left. The buildings stood. The contents stayed inside. When California declared it a state historic park in 1962, officials found the town in a state of extraordinary completeness and made the decision that changed it into something unique. Arrested decay. Not restoration. Not reconstruction. Arrest. Hold it exactly where it is and let no further deterioration occur if possible. But add nothing and restore nothing. What you see in Bodie today is what they left. Dishes still on kitchen tables. Calendars on walls from the 1940s. A child's shoe under a bed. Whiskey bottles still behind the bar. The Methodist church at the edge of town, its stained glass windows intact, its pews empty, its hymnals still in the racks. In winter, the road closes under 6 feet of snow and Bodie simply waits, as it has for over a century. Waiting for no one. On the central Oregon coast, at a basalt headland called Cape Perpetua, the Pacific Ocean has found what appears to be a drain. A hole in the rock shelf at the water's edge, roughly 20 feet across and 20 feet deep, into which the ocean pours continuously, and from which, seconds later, the ocean explosively returns. Thor's Well is a collapsed sea cave. The roof gave way at some point in geological time, decades ago or centuries. No one is certain. leaving a roughly circular opening in the basalt shelf. When ocean swells drive water into the remaining cave structure below, the pressure forces that water back up through the opening in a geyser that can reach 10 or 15 feet into the air. Then the wave retreats, and the well drains, appearing for a few breathtaking seconds to pull the surrounding ocean back into itself, as if the Pacific is being slowly swallowed by the earth. Photographers come from across the world to capture this effect at high tide, when the drama is greatest and the water moves with the most force. It is also one of the most genuinely dangerous natural features on the Oregon coast. The basalt shelf is slippery, the waves are unpredictable, and the power of the water moving in and out of the well is extreme. People are swept off the rocks with some regularity. The Pacific does not negotiate. But in the golden hour, when the sun drops low over the horizon and the sea turns copper and the well cycles through its ancient rhythm, drain and fill, it looks not like a geological curiosity but like something intentional. A threshold. A gate. The exact point where the knowable world ends and something else, larger and older and indifferent, begins. One country. A landscape so varied, so extreme, so impossibly beautiful in so many completely different ways, that a single lifetime of dedicated travel would not exhaust it. We spend so much time dreaming of the world beyond our borders that we forget. The most unreal places on Earth might be a road trip away. Go find them.